Discord open? No, I can actually hear you really well. That's good that you're driving. You still seem to have good cell service. So, Extreme Dad, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original messages that you sent me were not the nicest in the world. Is that accurate?
That's correct. I was coming fresh off of your Doobie performance. So,
which one?
The one where you used the broom joke a few too many times.
Oh, but, yeah, he really got under my fucking skin that time. What a fucking asshole.
No, you can go fuck yourself, Doobie. You can fuck yourself with a fucking broom.
Please.
Okay.
But yeah,
so
talk to me.
Admittingly, like, not your most like reasonable portrayal, but at the same time, sometimes, of course, just like the emotions got the better of you in that situation. Sometimes my emotions get the better of me, and I might make some rude or not so like becoming like comments. But the thing is that I've watched a lot of your stuff since then. I think you're a little bit more reasonable. I think we'll be able to find some areas where we agree, but we certainly have our differences.
Yeah. So
what would you go ahead?
Oh, yeah. So I was going to kind of ask. So I was surprised because basically when somebody is coming fairly aggressively and calling me a piece of shit to my face, it's normally because I've tripped up on some kind of lefty progressive, authority, whether that's like, no borders or American hegemony or the war on terror or police aren't neo-Nazis. That's kind of the thing that I bump into. So I almost automatically assumed that you were a leftist that was pissed off. So from a right-wing perspective, Doobie and I were debating police brutality, and I was taking the position that police brutality existed. Some of it was explainable and not justified, but explainable. What was kind of like your perception of that conversation, and what was kind of like the facilitation of your frustration to be like, hey, this dude's a fucking asshole, I'm going to reach out? So
it's kind of your like tacit like approval of the Goon Squad, and just like this idea that like police are in any way like I don't want to say morally superior, but this like kind of like it's explainable why these people need to be beat up when like it's hard to like not, or maybe it's difficult for you to understand, but like being like in the other guy's situation, the upset person who like needs the Goon Squad called on them, their rage, they're upset, like calling you an asshole or all this stuff, like that's a little bit justified and explainable as well. I just think that there's like this kind of approval by you of some practices to which I would disagree with. And I guess I could like kind of let you explain that or extrapolate on that a little bit, your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, 100%. So one of my frustrations when it comes to the Goon Squad or whatever actually is it's a question of competence. So I feel like 99.9% of like human meltdowns when it comes in reference to law enforcement can be avoided by a large amount of social intelligence. If you're able to set expectations with somebody who's about to be arrested and say like, hey, listen, I'm sorry, but we got to do this. And then kind of walk them through like, hey, we're going to this place. We're going to process paperwork for 30 minutes to 45 minutes. After that, I'm going to take you to this place. You're going to see a judge in the morning, and I'm sorry, but this kind of is what it is. If you set expectations properly, you can avoid a lot of the panic attack. And if then
100%.
And then if somebody is having the panic attack after that, you can still take a like conciliatory or not paternalistic, like where you're being a douche, but paternalistic kind of like, hey, buddy, I guess this sucks, but we got to do it. That you can take that kind of tone and you will get rid of 99.9 of the panic attacks that you have.
The issue is, of course, that cops don't want to do that.
Some cops intentionally inflame the anxiety of the people that they're working with because they either think it's funny or they think that punishing this person is not their moral duty, but something that they don't mind doing as a part of their job.
And I would say some of them probably even imagine it's their moral duty. It's their right to kind of punish them because they're better, or they're just thugs essentially, thugs with a badge.
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that people do self-justify that kind of behavior in a lot of ways, where they basically they tell themselves, oh, well, society is filled with trash, and it's a bunch of like literally, it's like every
In
boom.
blue line, right?
Well, not just that, but it's also all the boomer memes. So it's like, this is a participation trophy generation, and I'm going to teach them a thing or two about the real world. And so then they assert themselves as this like moral arbiter to make a situation that's already incredibly uncomfortable as possible. And they view the transport as their opportunity to inflict like some level of natural justice on a criminal justice system that is kind of a revolving door in a lot of ways, where a lot of people that we feel should get more punishment don't. And I've just kind of found from like a utilitarian standpoint, that's incredibly counterproductive. It can get people hurt or killed, and it's unprofessional as fuck. And that's actually part of the
ride.
Yeah, rough rides. So that's part of the reason why I think in-car body cameras and universal body cameras is such an important development, because it doesn't eliminate this behavior, but it reduces the ability of it to exist. Because if people see that on camera, they're going to become a lot less sympathetic to law enforcement. But
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
How often or how many police reports, like out of 100%, what percentage do you think are fabricated in some way, or there is some sort of lie on them?
0.01.
Really?
Fabric. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Ask the question again.
What percentage of police reports do you think are in some way untrue or like exaggerated, fabricated, a lie, like just even if it's a small detail, but have some element that was not reality?
Oh, okay. So let me clarify my 0.01 thing, and then let me tell you where what you're poking at. I might be able to concede. So the 0.01 I think applies to intentional lies in an attempt to achieve incarceration. So basically, this person hasn't done anything wrong, or if they did, they literally just like they looked at the cop wrong or something like that. So the cop is making something up in order to put them in jail. I think that's probably 0.01. If you're talking about what percentage of police reports have personal bias that try to color the events as more extreme than they are, or try to color the events in the cop's favor, that's like 100%. So there's a lot of nitty gritty in there, but maybe if you ask another question, I could answer it better.
Well, and that's just the thing, is that I think that personal body cameras are most important and probably most heavily pushed back against, because the police reports kind of rely on this kind of like ability to bias it against the defendant or the perpetrator or whatever you want to call them. I mean, it's that would be lost if there were personal body cameras. Like the reports would kind of be more strictly following the video. I mean, they would have to. And I think that's why you don't see them in a lot of places, is because police like the fact that they get to write the narrative.
Yeah, but the thing about it is this cultural wave of what's happening with law enforcement and body cameras and all that kind of stuff, it's not going to change. And as a matter of fact, especially if you're talking about patrol cops might some patrol cops might not like. If you can still hear me, okay.
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, patrol cops might not like body cameras, but the administration loves body cameras. And the reason why they love them is because it ends frivolous lawsuits. I think it's been shown to like diminish police complaints by like 90%. And this is from two things. Number one, cops know they're on camera, so they're behaving better. That's number one. Number two is that the public, because they know they're being recorded, they know that if they file a complaint and it's not substantiated through the body camera during the interaction, then they don't have a complaint. So this is kind of cutting it at both ends, where body cameras are so advantageous that it's literally only podunk, good old boy fraternal clubs that don't have a lot of funding to begin with, and the police chief doesn't give a fuck, and the city mayor doesn't give a fuck. Those are the only places that don't have body cams at this point, to my knowledge. Although I do think like a federal mandate and subsidy for body cameras absolutely should be a thing for police reform.
Because it's like there's almost really no excuse as to why we wouldn't have them. I mean, there's really almost no.
Do you know what the real reason is?
What?
I don't want the body camera to catch me picking my nose. I don't want it to catch me surfing social media on my phone. I don't want it to catch but that's like the thing. It's the I'm not saying that's a good reason. I'm saying that's a reason. And then also cops can lose their shit and they can cuss and yell at members of the public, which is not professional, and they should try not to do it. But there are some situations where, like you said, you can become emotionally compromised, especially when it comes to people living or dying, getting shot or stabbed or whatever. And then you basically look like an asshole on camera. So that's not a good reason. I'm just telling you that's the reason.
Would you agree that the police, they're not there to get to the bottom of things? They're there to make arrests. Or would you agree with that?
I think that's how law enforcement can be misused. So for instance, like, I would say that when I went in, I was able to maintain my bright-eyed and bushy-tailed idealism for about 3 years. And I was, kind of the person who was like, hey, we're here to serve a higher purpose, which is to, serve communities of the public and, basically prevent crime and, go after violent criminals and all that kind of stuff. So, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm gonna handle that shit. But there's these nefarious things with like statistics in particular, where statistics incentivizes cops to engage in toxic behaviors on a systemic level, and then they're rewarded for it. So the cops who basically like they start like, so for me, if I start my shift and I patrol the neighborhood and I don't harass anybody for 12 hours, but I basically just like drive the same streets over and over again, and I have 0 burglaries in my zone, then I'm a good cop to the community, but from an administrative perspective, I didn't do shit. Whereas if a cop shows up, he gets into his beat, he tickets somebody for jaywalking, arrests somebody for possession, takes him to jail, arrests another person for possession, takes him to jail, arrests another person for simple battery, takes him to jail, and then their zone gets like 5 burglaries, and then they get 5 burglary reports. That's an awesome cop. He's a goddamn superhero. Although all he did was fuck over people who were committing very simple crimes. Does that make sense?
Totally. It makes perfect sense. And that's just the thing. And I like to hear you say fuck over people who are committing very simple crimes. Because the thing is that, like, criminals exist, obviously, and we kind of had this talk, or I asked this as a question in chat, but felonies have been expanded from, what used to be very, very serious offenses only to essentially mostly anything. And the stigma around that, or the stigma on people, ruins lives. I mean, no question.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Good. Well, the main thing is just to bring this full circle is that, like, what is it that you feel is an officer's job when let's say he gets a call, let's say a burglary, or no, that's not a good one. Let's say a domestic violence. So a cop arrives on a domestic violence call. What is his number one job?
Oh, unfortunately, this is another bad example, but it's okay because I'll walk you through it. Domestic violence is actually one of the things cops can hold a decent amount of discretion. Where they can decide who or if somebody goes to jail. Domestic violence, unfortunately, because of the history of domestic violence, whereas in the 80s and 90s, cops would see it more as like a civil matter. They would oftentimes show up, be like, "Hey, you two knock it off for the night," and then they would leave, and that would be the whole thing.
One has to go to jail, and that's why I chose this one.
Yes, and that was the thing, is it's literally administrative policy to say that if you can corroborate a battery with any level of physical evidence or evidence at all, like even like testimony that seems to be in line with a narrative, you make an arrest. And it doesn't matter if it makes a conviction. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't fucking matter. You're taking somebody to jail. And for me, I bumped into domestic violence situations in which, oh my God, there's this one that I'll never forget. There was this couple who were really nice and really positive with us every time we came into the community. And they were both in their 60s. And like one of them had lost both their legs due to oxygen. Or due to diabetes, excuse me. And that same person was on oxygen. And then the other person, the male half, He was just like, he wasn't as disabled, but he was still disabled. And they got into a spat one night. They called us before they realized what they were doing. She pinched him with her grabber. He said it. She admitted to it. They were trying to take this lady to jail for pinching the guy with the grabber because it's technically domestic violence. And I literally had to fight with my supervisor for like 30 fucking minutes to get them to not take a 60-year-old woman missing 2 of her legs from the knee down to jail.
So just just to answer the question, an officer arrives on that scene. What would you say his primary job is?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think it's to make an arrest. I think there has to be a law enforcement purpose served, but I do think there's a lot of cops who have administrative blind spots and they literally stop seeing people as people. They see paperwork checkboxes to be checked. And
I'm really glad you said that.
And they also see, not only do they see paperwork checkboxes to be checked, they also see the implication of violence to check those checkboxes as non-implicatory. Like, it has no bearing on whether or not, in order to check these checkboxes, they have to beat the fuck out of somebody. They're going to check the boxes.
They might even want to or enjoy it. But the thing is that they stop seeing people as people is incredibly important. I think I'm glad you said that. So I think that is the core of the problem, is that these become interactions in which you're not seeing the other person as human. This individual that they're arresting isn't seen as a member of the public or like a person in their society. They're seen as this kind of like enemy or this non-human kind of like checkbox, this person they're arresting. So I'm asking you if what do you think can be meaningfully done about this to rectify it in any way, or where do you think we're headed?
Yeah, so no, we're good. I think we're headed towards perpetuating the status quo because we don't have any leaders with balls. But there's quite a few things that I think we could do. And one of those things is going to be costly, and the taxpayers are not going to want to foot it, but it would help solve the problem. The part of the problem with viewing people not as human beings but as checkboxes is the emotional demands of the job. And what I mean by this is there's super nice cops and then there's super asshole cops. And they often stay in one of those gears their entire career. And what I mean by that is it's probably 80-22 asshole to nice cop. So what happens with asshole cops is they deal with so many like rude and shitty people who have beaten the fuck out of each other and done drugs and, are fighting and screaming and cussing and abusing their kids and all that kind of shit, that they just, at one point, something in them snaps, if it didn't snap before, and they say, fuck it, everybody's a piece of shit. I'm gonna treat everybody like a piece of shit. And then they walk around with a fucking chip on their shoulder and they stay in that emotional gear. When it comes to the nice cops, they're so desperate to try to cling on to some level of decent humanity that they're literally like, they're walking around like, oh, hey guys, good morning. That's literally how they carry themselves. Some of them have personalities like that, but that's how they carry it because they don't want to acknowledge how fucked up the world that they're in is. So for me, part of the reason why I burnt out emotionally so fast in my career is because I would actually vacillate between these two emotional perspectives based off of context. So when I dealt with people who were incredibly nice, who were trying to help me, I tried to help them. If they had a problem, I tried to solve it, all that kind of stuff. So I would try to be the happy-go-lucky, nice cop in some circumstances. But then if we got into violence or if we got into really dangerous situations, then asshole cop came out. And it was actually incredibly emotional. It was like an emotional seesaw bouncing between these two perspectives throughout your shift. And it's really hard to master the ability to know contextually which emotional space you need to be in. So to answer your question, though, because all I did was describe a problem, to answer your question is, I think that seriously every 3 years, cops should be rotated off the road for a year. Like, I'm not shitting you. Like they should be given an administrative job. They should be given an investigative job. They should move into something that like takes them off of the road so they don't have emotional burnout. And if there's somebody who's experiencing emotional burnout, they need to have the opportunity to put their hand up and say, listen, I just cussed out a 15-year-old because I saw somebody die the other night and I'm fucked up. I need desk duty for a couple of weeks so I can get my shit together. And that needs to be an option. And right now it's not.
Is there a heavy stigma around that, like requesting desk duty?
Yep.
So
I literally, sorry, I won't be long, but I literally had a supervisor shit talk to me, another supervisor, because the other supervisor had a breakdown after responding to a double homicide in which she held the two people as they died. And he shit talked her to me because she had an emotional reaction to it.
Now, how prevalent would you say that this like jarhead mentality is around things like
90%, 95%?
Really?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I was that too, because you gotta be mean. You gotta be mean to hang out with mean people. So like you can save that part of your humanity for when it's appropriate, dealing with kids, dogs, old people, all that kind of shit. But yeah, if you're dealing with fucking brutal people, you gotta be brutal.
Now, how often did you encounter violence in your time on the force?
It was so out of 3 years on the road, I probably had 36 incidents that were specifically violent, probably a dozen homicides, and not even a dozen homicides, a half dozen homicides, and each critical incident, so incident where I was in danger or I was inflicting danger on somebody else, each one of those was probably less than 20 minutes. So you got to take like 36 times 20. I want to do this because I want to show the audience just how few of time this is. That's 720 minutes divided by 60. So out of 167 times 52. So hold on, sorry, one second. So let's do 36 times 20. 720 divided by 60, that's 12. All right, so just remember the number 12 really quick. 167 times 52 times 3. So out of 26,000 hours, I was in danger for 12 hours.
So, and what would you say, like, when you say in danger, were you talking about life or death?
Yeah.
Or just like varying degrees?
Yeah, I was pointing my guns at people. I was chasing people who had hurt or killed other people. I was responding to emergency medical situations, all that kind of stuff. And just for the people at home, that means that I was in danger 0.04% of the time. So it's a very, to your point, if you were going to make this point, it's a very fractional part of the job, but it's a very real part of the job. And part of the psychological mindfuck is not being able to pick when that dangerous thing happens. You're literally like waking up, getting coffee, doing your thing, and then bam, like there's a homicide, like, or a chase or something. You know, you don't get to pick when the crazy thing happens. You still there, buddy? I think I might have lost you. I'll jump in and jump back. Hey, buddy, can you hear me? Uh-oh, guys, we might have lost them. We'll talk to chat until he comes back. Nickelodeon. All right, just scrolling up, checking out questions. Give me a second.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. What's up, buddy?
I don't know what happened there. But anyway, the point is that getting back to what I was saying, I was watching that video of you doing the car chase.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty neat. Always good to have that helicopter footage to show your kid or whatever. But when that officer spike stripped them, even though protocol wasn't necessarily to spike strip them, what do you think? What do you think the appropriate punishment for that is?
Oh, I am
or the appropriate response.
Yeah, I'm very bad to talk to about this because I am literally of two minds when we have these kinds of questions. The reason why you don't spike strip cars and the reason why law enforcement are prohibited from chases for non-serious offenses or less serious offenses is because what's happened when cops used to chase all the time is they would chase criminals left, right, and center, and then they would chase a criminal car into a civilian car, and they would kill a family of four, or kill a kid, or kill a parent, or something like that, because they were getting into these dangerous chases routinely. So what's happened is police procedure has changed to you only chase for what's called forcible felonies, which is basically like robberies, aggravated assaults, like all that kind of stuff, which I think is a good standard. When it comes to using the spike strip specifically, while typically prohibited from a standard use of force thing, this did happen at, I want to say, like 1 a.m, 2 a.m. There's no other cars on the road. It's literally just the cop vehicles and the suspect car. I think contextually, if you were going to spike a car, this would actually be an appropriate time to do it. So that's where, for me, it doesn't boil down to like when you have these hard rules, like you don't chase unless it's a serious crime. You kind of limit the flexibility of law enforcement to make judgment calls, and a lot of cops are stupid, so I understand why you want to do that. But I also think it robs cops of their agency, and it kind of enforces that checkbox mentality that you were kind of talking about, where basically cops don't think for themselves. They don't think like, hey, what's appropriate in this circumstance? How do I handle it? They literally say, I do have these check boxes, so I can spike a car, or I don't have these check boxes, so I can't spike a car. And that's really kind of the personality that you're attracting and promoting. So I don't really have a good answer for you.
And part of you kind of wants to make part of you wants to kind of let the cop off, right? You kind of don't want him to get in trouble.
Of course.
You kind of want us to make excuses for him, right?
Yeah, literally. Write him up, tell him he's a bad boy, slap his hand, and call it a day. Yep, pretty much.
And this is the core of my issue, and kind of what I came to talk to you about is that mindset, I think, is very prevalent within officers, and I think that creates an untenable situation for the police and the public. This idea that there's sort of like a fraternity that is going to be, problems or mistakes or like the rules that get broken are kind of going to be looked past, and we'll make excuses if something goes wrong, or there's no accountability. And we say that there is, and we pretend like there is, but at the end of the day, there really isn't, unless there's some sort of outside pressure or some sort of situation where nothing can really be done to make excuses, or there's video evidence, or what have you. Almost got killed. Like George Floyd's a great example. Coworkers going to happen. How do we put it in that situation? Because there's video evidence. But if there wasn't, guaranteed those other officers are going to say that, oh no, he was resisting, and like we own this institution. And how do we not essentially boil down to this tribal strife of one group versus the other?
Yeah. So what I would say, we've already talked about like universal body cameras, and federal subsidization. There's no reason why any patrol cop and even any narco cop serving a warrant shouldn't have a live body camera while they're performing police functions, right? So that's step number one. Step number two is something that I like to call third-party accountability. There's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is a terrifying institution for local law enforcement, because they have the state police under their jurisdiction, and state police are explicitly told during training that if they find a cop committing a crime, then they don't get a fucking pass. That's literally like what they're told. So we're told as local cops, don't fucking speed unless you have a reason to. Don't fucking do this unless you have a reason to. Don't do that unless you have a reason to, because state police will come and fuck you up. And it's kind of like a known fear within Florida law enforcement to not fuck with state police, because they will fuck you so hard. And so basically, they have what's called a shoot team. Anytime a Florida law enforcement officer gets into a gunfight, I don't know if it's just a law enforcement gunfight or if it's a homicide. But every time that they, I forget if it's a homicide, but it doesn't really matter. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement dispatches a shoot team in order to investigate it. I think you could take that same team, expand it up to a few hundred officers, and then investigate cases of brutality, abuse of authority, and all that kind of stuff. And also make it mandatory that if you have, like, so for instance, like the George Floyd kind of thing where you see an officer do something nefarious, put reporting as a liability on officers who see wrongdoing. Because cops are so terrified of civil suit and going to jail themselves for a major fuck up, that if you see something nefarious, you have to report it, and you have to report it to this authority that is outside your own organization, that would clean up a lot of this nepotistic bullshit. And I know I've said a lot, but I want to say this too. Part of the problem with the reporting structures as they exist right now is if it's not a homicide or if it's not a shooting, you report it to your own chain of command. And your own chain of command oftentimes will punish the reporter more than the person who did like the nefarious activity. So that's kind of it's a massive problem, massive fucking problem.
So you would say that essentially that police reports are fundamentally flawed, of course.
Not this has nothing to do with reports. Reports are done for incidents. So
I get it.
Yeah. So I'm saying reporting, that might be where we're getting a little bit of a hang up.
Totally.
But I would say that reporting negative law enforcement behavior to your chain of command, it's pretty much known that if they don't like you, they'll fuck you. And if they do, like, they'll fry you at the stake for dumb shit if they don't like you. And then if they do like you, they'll fucking bend over backwards and over to cover your fucking ass. And it feels very arbitrary. It feels very nepotistic. It feels very at the whim of your supervisor's supervisor, and the fucking deputy chief and the chief, whether or not they like you, kind of determines whether or not you get fried. And then also, there's also this other nefarious component that's incredibly political. I was talking to a peer of mine who had been in trouble several times. And I was basically talking about, like, hey, I was thinking about going to this other department. Maybe I would do this in the future or whatever. And he was like, well, you better not fuck up in the next year. And I was like, why? What's the problem? And he's like, well, this department, if they want to keep you, but you have like some bad habits, they have a tendency to document your bad behavior just enough that you're not hireable by other departments, but not enough to fire you. And so it becomes this like nepotistic shell game where they'll bury you in administrative paperwork, basically so you can't further your career. Whereas other people, they'll like blow them in the street in order to get them where they want to go. It sucks. It absolutely sucks.
So it's almost like a fraternity. Like I said, it's a favoritism process. It's a process of there's flaws within the institution that make it kind of untenable as it is. Would you agree?
I would say it's untenable because it sucks. But I would also say that I've been a part of half a dozen public and private institutions that have completely varied in their industry, and they've all suffered similar problems. The military had similar problems. Sales for a fashion company had similar problems. I'm trying. If I could list you my career, but I don't want to dox myself.
I was in the military, and I didn't see anything more. I didn't see anything like I see in the current police force or current police institution.
You didn't. What branch?
I was in the Army.
In the Army. And you're telling me that they didn't have dumb fucks getting promoted left, right, and center?
They didn't have the same excuse and nepotism and kind of like a passive or like a I don't even know the word I'm looking for. This like total understanding that if you do something wrong, we'll cover for you as long as like it wasn't on camera. Like this understanding that like you can kind of do things that are wrong and get away with it because your buddies will cover for you.
Well, then I'll give you a counterexample, though. So I'm happy that you served with a good unit. I'm happy that you had a good chain of command. And we are, just to give you a little heads up, we are coming to the last 5 minutes. But I'm happy that you had a good chain of command. But Robert Bales is a staff sergeant who's currently serving life. I think he might even be awaiting death row. We'll see. You could Google him to find out. But he was responsible for basically murdering a few dozen Afghan civilians, and he executed them. And he did it single-handedly, and he basically went on a mass shooting spree in Afghanistan. So I have friends who were in the same unit and basically said that there were multiple attempts by people to bring to the command's attention that he was fucking losing it and that he was a psychopath and he had bad fucking habits at home and he had bad habits on deployment and he was tactically fucking dangerous and he was an asshole and he got a fucking DUI and the chain of command covered it up for him. And as a result of them not dealing with this young man's psychological break, 30 Afghan civilians, or, I forget it, it's like a dozen to 2 dozen, a dozen to 2 dozen Afghan civilians suffered the wrath of Robert Bales because his chain of command covered for him. So I don't think this is unique to law enforcement at all. I think it's just worse in law enforcement because of the power wielded by
basically
the
we're just fucked across the board. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. But you always push for better. Just because shit's bad doesn't mean you don't push for better.
Last thing, and then I'll let you go. But what about district attorneys? Do district attorneys have way too much power?
Yeah, they do. I'm sure they could justify to me why they deserve as much power as they do, but I really resent the fact that because we over-police our communities. Oh, I wanted to mention this before you go. You kind of mentioned the fact that felony used to mean that somebody had committed a capital offense, and now it means anything. Having 20 grams of marijuana in the state of Florida is a felony. Having 3 grams of cocaine is a felony. Basically, possession level of drugs can be a felony very easily. Theft over $300 can be a felony. So now felony just means fucking everything. And the problem with felony is that it stays on your record forever, and it's very difficult to get gainful employment afterwards. And as a result, people who become felons basically have to either know somebody in order to get a good job, or they're relegated to working retail and restaurant for the rest of their fucking lives. So that's kind of frustrating for a lot of people. And I feel it because basically I think that after 2 years of not recidivizing, felon should be wiped from your fucking record. Like, you should no longer be a felon. You should be able to participate in society fully. But unfortunately, we don't have a society that's really interested in like forgiveness or redemption. So, yeah. That's
a huge problem. And I think that's pretty much my main motivation is just that, like, it really sucks that people who, I recently, not very recently, but I recently went through something in the courts where I actually, had to go to a trial and I was representing myself. And I won, thankfully, but it just could have gone the other way so easily. And it's just crazy that would have caused society to view me as almost subhuman. It's one of those things where it's just like, we as a society need to either lessen our view of criminals or lighten our view of criminals, or be more understanding of people who've been convicted of crimes, or reduce the amount of crimes that we're convicting people of somehow, some way. And I just think that district attorneys are almost giddy or excited about convicting people. Mm-hmm. And I think that police officers are, almost the same way, if not a little bit more thuggish about it. But that's my personal opinion. I think we had a great discussion, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. You were very good about clearing up just the concerns that I had following your doobie conversation. Mm-hmm. And, I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, buddy. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Basically, if you do have contentions in the future or any issues in the future, if you want to join the community or anything like that, we'd be happy to have you. And then I think that this is a serious conversation that needs to be taken seriously, because when you're too close, when you're a cop or a state attorney, kind of like we said, the system will get you to consider people to be just a number instead of a human being. And I think we need to remember that we're dealing with human beings. So I do appreciate you, coming on, challenging the perspectives and sharing your experiences. So thank you totally. Right back.
Yeah. And if you want to put in a good word for me with Prime, that'd totally be okay with me too.
Oh, I will. Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Catch you, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. We ain't done yet. We still got mask off. We ain't going anywhere. We still got shit to do.